All right, well, we can go ahead and get started here. Is everyone okay in the back? Can you hear me at this level? Good? Okay. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming. This is the first public meeting for the I-29 Exit 71 Interchange Modification Study. My name is John Wiggin. I'm the Consultant Project Manager with HDR. And I have about a 20 to 25 minute presentation here to introduce the study before we break back out into the open house. So first, a couple quick housekeeping items. One thing, please sign in if you haven't done so at the front table. If you leave your contact information, we'll make sure to add you to the mailing list and email list for future notifications of public meetings and website updates. Also on that table is a comment card as well as informational handout. Everything for this study will be posted to the I-29exit71.com study website. So really throughout the study, updates, public meeting information will all be posted there. This first public meeting is a hybrid type meeting in that we have tonight's in-person component. We also have all this information that you see here on a public meeting virtual component that's linked through the study website. So if you have any questions or like to look at anything in further detail, you can certainly go to that website. All this information plus some additional information is there. There are various methods to provide feedback throughout the study. You can leave your comment card here tonight. You can submit comments and questions directly through the study website, or you can reach out to any of the study contacts by whatever method is convenient for you. The one thing they ask that for tonight's public meeting, that if you provide all comments by September 10th, that allows us to move into the next phase of study in a timely manner. So the purpose of tonight's public meeting is fourfold. The first one is I'll provide a study overview. I'll then present the project draft purpose and need, essentially why is the DOT doing this project and what needs are they looking to address. And then I'll transition into introducing the I-29 Exit 71 interchange and I-29 mainline alternatives. And really the primary driver of tonight's meeting is to gather feedback and answer questions for you all here in this first step of the study. So South Dakota Department of Transportation is the lead agency with this study, and at the onset, they organized a study advisory team to help guide the study through completion. And that's made up of representatives from the DOT, Federal Highway Administration, Sioux Falls MPO, Lincoln County, City of Harrisburg, and City of T. DOT also retained the services of the consulting firm HDR, and we're helping them deliver this study. The two study contacts, again, myself, John Wiggin, Consultant Project Manager with HDR, and Steve Graham, who is a project manager with the South Dakota Department of Transportation. So first, a little bit of background. In 2018, the DOT completed a study, the I-29 Exit 62 to 73 corridor study. And in that study, they identified a number of needs from an operations and safety standpoint at the I-29 Exit 71 interchange, as well as I-29 mainline capacity and pavement condition needs. Throughout that study, that's where they looked to, from that initial high-level look in terms of concepts at the interchange, kind of the brainstorming session. They went through an evaluation as well as refinement process and ultimately developed some recommendations to be carried out of that study. So using those recommendations, the DOT identified this project that we're here to talk about tonight for future construction starting in fiscal year 2028. And that is looking to reconstruct I-29 mainline from exit 68 northward through exit 73, as well as reconstructing the I-29 exit 71 interchange. So the study area we're looking at is bound on the west side by 470th Avenue, on the east side 471st Avenue, and then from north to south from 85th Street to the north and exit 68 to the south. Within that, we're really focusing in on the project limits, and that's bound from, again, I-29 from 85th Street to exit 68, and from 470th Avenue to 471st Avenue along 273rd Street. So the study goals are really threefold. The first one is to develop an interchange modification justification report, also known as an IMJR. And in that report, that's where we go through and document the analysis and evaluation of the various alternatives. And that leads to the recommendation of the most technically feasible interchange alternative that goes as part of the DOT's request to the Federal Highway Administration to make modifications at the I-29 exit 71 interchange. Second goal is to determine the southern extent and timeline for additional lanes on I-29. That's something I'll talk about a little bit more here in a little bit, looking at the need for 6 lanes or 4 lanes on I-29 and where that may occur within the study area. And the third goal is to develop environmental documents to analyze alternative. And this is analyzing potential environmental impacts of each of the alternatives we create and review as part of this study. And ultimately, that identifies a preferred alternative that we carry forward into design. So a little bit with project schedule. Right now, we are in the interchange modification study and environmental study. That started in February 2021. That we started with data collection, some initial analysis and refinement of alternatives carried forward from that previous corridor study. So that's what we're presenting here for you tonight. We'll be taking your feedback, your comments and questions that you might have tonight. We'll move into the next phase that gets into the refinement, more detailed evaluation, and ultimately developing preliminary recommendations for the interchange and I-29 main line. At that point, we'll come back for our second public meeting sometime this fall here in 2021. We'll present those preliminary recommendations again for your feedback and comment. The remaining steps of the study that's where we get into the IMGR phase, developing the report, going through the reviews and refinement, ultimately submitting that IMGR to the South Dakota Department of Transportation for submittal to the Federal Highway Administration on January 2022. The environmental component from a high level perspective in terms of our environmental scans started at the onset of the study. Around January 2021, we'll be able to transition into the more detailed environmental study, which we anticipate to last until summer or fall of 2022. At that point, we can move into design, which will extend up into that fiscal year 2028 timeframe, which construction will start. So next slide, a little bit of information here on the draft project purpose and need. And that's essentially why are we doing this project and what are we looking to address? It's a fairly lengthy purpose statement, but essentially we're looking to preserve transportation assets, provide for the reliability and efficiency of the transportation system, provide consistency of transportation planning along I-29 main line from exit 73 to exit 68 and on the County Highway 110 or 273rd Street corridor through the exit 71 interchange. And that's looking to address 2 primary needs. The first one is traffic operations, which was identified in the previous corridor study, that as I-29 volumes continue to grow, as development occurs in T and Harrisburg, volumes will increase within the interchange, so thus there is a capacity need that this project is looking to address. Also looking to address road surface conditions, that the DOT identified a need to reconstruct I-29 main line in that 2028 timeframe. So that's really one of those primary drivers from a timeframe standpoint. We're also looking to address some secondary needs, and that's safety and current design standards, which in a lot of instances go hand in hand. There's been some high severity crashes at the interchange. Some of that's due to limited sight distance, some other various geometric items. So that's something that as we're looking at alternatives, we bring the interchange up to current design standards. We address those issues and increase safety within the interchange. So here for the remainder of the presentation, we'll go through the alternatives that have been developed to date. With the interchange at exit 71, that we carried forward 3 different interchange types from the previous corridor study. And that's a compressed diamond type interchange, single point interchange or an SPI, diverging diamond interchange or a DDI. And within those 3 interchange types, we have 2 different options for each. And that's looking at whether we maintain I-29 going under 273rd Street, which is out there today, or we flip that and I-29 goes up and over 273rd Street, which would be similar to what you see at exit 73 just to the north. We also have a number of I-29 mainline alternatives that look at different configurations of 4-lane and 6-lane cross sections. So starting with the compressed diamond, this is a layout of what that compressed diamond looks like. And as you can see, a very similar footprint to what's out there today. That this layout looks at addressing those operational needs, addressing safety, and bringing the interchange up to current design standards. So a lot of the characteristics of a compressed diamond that you see today will be integrated here, just upgraded for that future year. With this one that we show the I-29 under option shown here, this is the least expensive of all the alternatives at around $21 million. And a lot of that is associated with the limited grading that's required for this option, as well as the small structure over on 273rd Street over I-29. That within these interchanges that we're looking at, what we call 3-lane section, which is a single lane in each direction plus center left turn lanes. And thus, that's what you get here with this type of structure and layout. The second option of the compressed diamond is where we flip I-29 and 273rd Street. As you can see here, that we have the two orange rectangles. Those are I-29 structures going up and over 273rd Street. Other than that, the footprint is very similar. That, looking primary changes that flip are the roadways, the dual structures on I-29, and then the grading associated with making that flip. And those are the key factors that with this option, we're looking at a cost around $25 million. The next interchange configuration is a single point interchange, or SPI. And this is one of those that very similar. There's a lot of SPIs here throughout the Sioux Falls area. And this is, instead of the two intersections within the interchange, everything comes to a single centralized intersection that'd be signalized upon opening. One of the benefits of a single point interchange is it increases the spacing between adjacent intersections. So if you remember with the compressed diamond, you have the two intersections. They're out away from I-29. There's that element of spacing with your next access points to the west and the east. In this instance, everything is pulled tight with that centralized intersection. You increase that spacing between intersections, which is the benefit to operations and safety into the future. One of the drawbacks is the large structure. If you remember the size of the orange rectangles in the previous alternatives, this one is considerably bigger. And that's what contributes to this one being the highest cost of all the alternatives we're looking here tonight at around $33 million. The option where we flip I-29 and 273rd Street, again, very similar footprint, primary difference associated with what those structures look like and the grading. On this one, the cost is lower than that $33 million and around $29.5 million. The third interchange type is a diverging diamond interchange, or DDI. And this is one of those that currently there aren't any in South Dakota, but there are a number in design. So while this might be a new interchange from what we're looking at here today, people will be familiar with them moving in the future. That this is an interchange type that's proposed at the 85th Street interchange to the north on I-29, what's being designed on I-29 and 41st Street, I-229 and Benson Road, I-90 exit 406 in Brandon are all planned for DDIs. So it's one of those that, yeah, drivers might be unfamiliar with it now, but it's something that people will be familiar with by the time this project comes around. And this is that type of interchange where traffic is crossed over to the other side at the two crossover intersections on either side of I-29 main line. And this is really a benefit from an operations and safety standpoint that eliminates left turns at those primary intersections, and everything is controlled either through those crossover intersections or through left turns that are either yield controlled or free movements. One of the drawbacks of DDI in this instance is that it provides the least separation from the interchange itself to those next adjacent intersections. But as you can see, that by the time you get to Ponderosa and even over to Kenworth on the east side, we're still just barely transitioning back to 273rd Street alignment. So it's one of those things, use a much bigger footprint overall than what you see with some of those other alternatives. The cost with this one, where I-29 goes under 273rd Street, is around $25.5 million. And then the option where I-29 and 273rd Street is flipped, just due to the impacts of the grading, and again, you get into a little bit with the structure type work, you're looking at around $30 million. So in the next few slides, I do want to touch on a few different considerations that we're looking at, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we're taking a look, that we'll probably particularly be looking at in greater detail here in this next phase. And hopefully this will generate comment and maybe some questions that you might have for the open house portion here tonight. The first one is from a traffic operations standpoint, that in predictive safety, that all the alternatives that are carried forward from the previous study provide really solid operations and safety. That they address forecasted traffic volumes that we anticipate using this interchange for the next 15, 20, 25 years, and do that very well. From a predictive safety standpoint, incorporates current design standards. And some of the interchanges incorporate little nuances here that are really notable safety benefits for that application. So that's something to keep in mind. Everything that you see here from an operations and safety standpoint, very good, well into the future. Another item we're looking at is control of access. And this is what we call, it's a federal requirement that of minimum spacing between an interchange, ramp terminal intersection, and the next adjacent access point. That federal highway requires at least 100 feet here in urban areas outside of essentially where that intersection begins or ends from the interchange. So that's one of the things that you'll see in all these alternatives, that we consolidate Ironworks and Kenworth off to the east. And that is pushing that access point outside of the required control of access for this interchange. And one other thing with that, associated with that access consolidation, we also have a couple different options of how that access would be provided back to Kenworth, or back to Ironworks, whether it's up tight with 273rd Street or further to the north. So if you have property or business in this area, we'd certainly be interested to hear if you have any comments on either of those two access options. Another consideration is more of a vertical component. One of those is 9 Mile Creek, just on the northern edge of the interchange. With some of the recent flooding over the last few years, that it hasn't overtopped I-29, but it's got a little too close for comfort. And that's something that, as part of the study, we're looking at the potential need for a grade raise through here, essentially to reduce the risk of that potential closure of I-29 in the future due to flooding at this location. On the flip side, we're also looking at potential grade raise conflicts with the WAPA transmission line. And that's something that is further south of 9 Mile Creek, that when we start, if we were to start raising the grade, particularly with the I-29 over interchange options, we start getting into some of those clearance concerns by WAPA. And that's something that we've initiated contact with them. We've had some preliminary discussions, but we'll be working through them to see really from a clearance standpoint what might be allowed here at this interchange. Another consideration is maintenance of traffic during construction. So the two I-29 under interchange options with the compressed diamond and the diverging diamond interchange, where I-29 goes under 273rd Street, that we can maintain traffic across I-29 during construction. And we anticipate something very similar to what the DOT did down at the Canton exit 62, where they removed that northern bridge across I-29. They kept the southern one, maintained traffic across I-29 via that structure through most of construction. And they constructed the new structure immediately adjacent to that in the north, just north of the remaining bridge. So that's something that the alternatives with those two, the compressed diamond and DDI, have incorporated. So that could be accommodated as part of construction. On the flip side, you get the I-29 over options and the single point interchange options that would likely require closure of the interchange crossroad and require a detour. I have an example up here of exit 73, just here to the north, that originally that was constructed at 271st Street over I-29. And that was one where the DOT did flip it, where now I-29 goes up and over 271st Street. And the middle aerial there shows what they essentially, that it was a full interchange closure. They rerouted I-29 on a temporary road off to the east, but essentially during construction of that interchange, no access to I-29 via 271st Street. So with that, I want to transition here to I-29 mainline alternatives, and that is looking at 4-lane and 6-lane reconstruction. So in that previous 2018 corridor study, that the study identified a short-term need for 6-lane section or 3 lanes in each direction from exit 71 northward through exit 73. And then south of exit 71 was a little bit more in that gray area, that to show that 4 lanes would suffice initially, but long range, that a 6-lane section was going to be needed there as well. So with this study, we're looking to answer that question here using updated traffic data and forecasting methodology. And we're looking to determine whether that the reconstruction, if DOT reconstructs it with a 6-lane section south of exit 71 or a 4-lane section, but they grade for that third additional lane in each direction, so it could be added later when needed by traffic volumes. And then with I-29, a couple other considerations we're looking at of interest. One of those is up to the north. So there is a planned interchange at 85th Street. So one of the things we're looking to do is determine how a 6-lane section is going to tie into that interchange, how we're going to tie in, the 85th Street interchange ramps with the exit 73 ramps, and then how that transition occurs across the bridges at the exit 73 interchange. So we do have a board that goes into some of that information. And one of the things we did find is that we would need auxiliary lanes between the 85th Street interchange and exit 73 to improve traffic operations. So essentially you'd have 4 lanes between those 2 interchanges. Another consideration we're looking at is Lincoln County Airport Runway Protection Zone. And this is something that we've had initial discussions with FAA and Lincoln County Airport officials. And currently right now, the southbound lanes of I-29 are within that runway protection zone, or RPZ. And one of the things that, especially if we start looking into potentially raising I-29 or adding lanes to the outside and encroaching further or higher into that RPZ area, that's when it starts to raise a little bit more of an issue for a further look. We did develop an alternative here to fully move I-29 east of that RPZ, about 70 to 75 feet. And what that would entail from a right-of-way acquisition standpoint, I think we're looking at around 5.7 acres needed to shift I-29 east and completely remove the travel lanes from that RPZ area. And this is one we also have a board in the back if this is of interest to you. So the next slide is of the 273rd Street or County Highway 110 corridor. And this is a conceptual layout of what this corridor could look like in the future. The one thing I want to stress is that this is illustrative, a long-range planning figure that shows what it could look like that if we make the improvements that we foresee from a traffic volume standpoint at the 470th Avenue intersection, at the 471st Avenue intersection, and tie into the potential improvements at the exit 71 interchange, really what that might look like long range. The thing I want to stress here again too is that no project or time frame for modification has been identified outside of the interchange footprint. And you'll see on the layout board that's clearly, clearly defined where essentially that the corridor, the future illustrative corridor improvements would occur, and then where the interchange improvements would occur. And one other item here I want to touch on before we close. On the I-29 corridor, we are looking at potential intelligent transportation system, or ITS elements. And so one of the things with this that, a lot of the ITS elements, they extend outside of this study area. But one of the questions we wanted or a couple of questions we want to look at is A, how would future ITS components fit here within this study area? And B, how would they fit if they're incorporated into a future project or implemented ahead of this project? Where would they need to go? So a couple of things that we're looking at with this from an ITS standpoint is closed circuit television cameras. They're essentially the vehicle monitoring. If you go to the DOT website or other, city of Sioux Falls or other DOT websites, and they have traffic cameras, you can watch, what the traffic's doing, see road conditions. That's the type of monitoring that can go back to the various DOT offices for their monitoring throughout the day. Also looking at variable speed limits. And this is something that the DOT has just started looking at with a couple test pilot projects. And this is basically where they can adjust the speed limit. A lot of times this is done in other states based on road conditions, that in inclement weather, they can drop the speed limit, instead of maybe 80 miles an hour, drop it to 70 or 65 or something like that. Increase and decreases speed variability along that corridor. So that's something that we're looking at how that might fit in here within the corridor, and then how that could be integrated with a larger project being looked at outside of the study. Also looking at potential dynamic message sign locations. ramp closure gates, interstate closure gates, flashing beacons, as well as from a communication standpoint, where would future fiber optic cable lines to connect everything be incorporated within the corridor? And that's something that could carry into the future design elements of this project. So with that, that's what I have here tonight for this introductory presentation. Like I said, just wanted to introduce the alternatives. The remainder of tonight's public meeting is an open house. There's a lot of representatives from the study advisory team here to answer your questions, go into any of the alternatives into further detail. We won't be taking questions tonight, but we just encourage you to go to the boards or reach out to any of the representatives and discuss and ask your questions with them. So the next steps of this study that we'll be taking all your feedback from tonight's meeting and through September 10th, we'll move into the next phase of the study, and that's where we go into further refinement, more detailed analysis, and we start to develop preliminary recommendations. And at that point, we'll be coming back to you for the second public meeting sometime here in the fall 2021. We anticipate kind of that October, November timeframe. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for your interest in the study. Really appreciate coming out tonight. We look forward to your feedback. Just a reminder that we do have a deadline for comments. We'd like those back by September 10th. Again, that allows us to move into the next phase of the study in a timely manner. All this information will be posted to the study website. There is a virtual meeting component. There's even some additional information in what you see here. I will also have a recording of the presentation if there's pieces that you wanted to revisit as well. So with that, just like to thank everyone, and we'll break out into the open house portion of tonight's meeting. Thank you.